in 1 Corinthians 9, Paul spends some time sort of defending his own ministry. There was some sort of some sort of an issue with the Corinthian church. They were favoring certain leaders and spiritual leaders over other leaders. And Paul, at this point now, sort of defends his leadership. He says, am I not as free as anyone else? Am I not an apostle? Haven't I seen Jesus our Lord with my own eyes? Isn't it because of my work that you belong to the Lord? He's reminding them that he's the one who planted the church. He's reminding them that even though he didn't walk with Jesus while Jesus was on the earth, with those original disciples, that it was just shortly after that he had his vision and that Jesus spoke to him and communicated to him. And so he's kind of defending himself. You can read that for yourself as you go through there. But look at what he says in verse 11. He's talking about sort of his right to be supported financially, for them to, because of all the work that he was doing among them, that he'd really sort of earned the right to be a recipient of some of the offerings that they might take in the church. But he says this, since we have planted spiritual seed among you, aren't we entitled to a harvest of physical food and drink? In other words, pay for what we do for you, for the church. But he says, if you support others who preach you, shouldn't we have an even greater right to be supported? Because remember, he's the one who planted the church in the first place. But he says, but we have never used this right. We would rather put up with anything than be an obstacle to the good news about Christ. And so he's saying to them, I'm a tent maker, which is what he was. He made tents to support himself. So he didn't actually take money for any of the work that he was doing. That wasn't what it was about. He wasn't trying to make money off of the gospel. He was trying to make disciples off of the gospel. That's what he says as you continue to read through this. He says, when I am weak, or when I am with those who are weak, I share their weaknesses, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. We see in this chapter Paul's passion for sharing the gospel with people. And we need to remember today, if you're a Christian, you have the responsibility. Foundation's truth number 3, we grow by helping others, by mentoring others. You and I have the responsibility of mentoring other people, making disciples. It's not just people like Paul and people called to full-time ministry. It's every single believer. Jesus intended for every single believer to get in the game and help other people to become Christians as well. And we see this example in Paul and Paul's life. I like what he says in verse 26. So I run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadow boxing. And this is great. He's using this imagery of an athlete. You think of the Olympic Games, which started there in Greece and Rome. And he's saying, listen, I have purpose in my life. And he pursued God with purpose all of his life. And I hope you do the same thing in your life. If you haven't taken mentor training yet, check that out and get in the game and start mentoring people. Start with 1 or 2 people in your world. If you look around, you'll realize that there are people in your world that need you to help them. And Paul helped so many people. What a great example. So you're ready to read 1 Corinthians chapter 9.